What I'm going to try to do, this is the BIMOTA parts, the second part of Vlad's job. The first part he's already got. He's taking it back to his house to put it together. The second half of this job is a very involved thing for a lot of reasons. What we've had to do, and I want to back up on this, because what I want to do is every day that I do work on this, I'd like to put the next step. We have to do this in steps. It's an involved process. There's dry times involved before certain things can happen. I wanted to show this. Number one, before we did anything with these parts, I did all these reinforcements. It's reinforced. And keep in mind, because this is a BIMOTA, relatively expensive bike, maybe a collector bike or whatever, but as you can see, this is the problem with all of this. These are parts that are very fragile, very delicate, maybe because of the nature of the bike, or that it's made to be a race bike, I don't know, or that somebody just plain abused them. We've got all these cracks to deal with. Now, dealing with these cracks, it would be too long if I were to do it all on one video. I've already done this on a previous video. What I've done before I try to fix the outside of this, now let me just explain this. When you do this kind of repair to this kind of a part, whether it's carbon fiber or whatever, anything that flexes, see, this is a flexible part, it's rubbery. If you fix the cosmetic side, the side you see first, yeah, you can Bondo it and you can do all your stuff. It'll look real pretty, but eventually it's going to bend, it's going to crack. So step one before you do anything, before there's any repair, is to get some carbon fiber or some reinforcement on the back, which we've already done. Second step on this, and this is a critical step. I wanted to explain this because I'm trying to do this on a step-by-step basis here. I'm getting the horse ahead of the cart. Now, I got these parts from Vlad a while back. Because this was such a labor-intensive job, I'm trying to do it in two separate parts. All of the black parts, all of the red parts. This is the way I got the part from Vlad. It's got fingerprints and grease and whatever. I'm sure it has wax. So I'm taking some Prepsol. Any brand, M600 is good too. And I'm trying to get off, before I even work on it, before I ever touch sandpaper to it. Here's the reason. If I don't get all the wax off first, and I were to just take a piece of sandpaper and grind this, I'm taking the wax molecules and driving them down into the paint and making myself a world of hurt somewhere down the road. So the right way to prep this part to get it ready is, number one, get all the grease off. Now, I do this kind of labor intensively. I don't skip steps. I don't try to get it done in a half an hour, and I just think you can see what comes off of it. I can do that several times in the course of doing this. And again, I like the M600. I just don't have any more right here. And Vlad picked up a gallon of this, so we're using that on his job. Now, once this is kind of sitting there, you would hope that's degreasing most of it. And you might be right. That might be the way that works. But before I wet sand this, I want to get most of that off, because this is going to be a really labor-intensive job to get these parts to show quality. Now, I'm looking at each one of these for cracks. I see. I'll do the little ones first. Let me just show. This is a little crack. The little crack is going to turn into a big crack. But see, if I bend it, it'll basically open up the crack. So what happens is, as that part is laying there like this, and I bend it, it opens the crack so that the CA can get down inside. When I release it, there'll be a good bond inside. Now the CA comes, and it's Brodax CA. The blue is thin. Thin is super, super capillary. This will just go right about through anything. So what I'm going to do is, before I do anything, I'm going to put a drop of that on there. While it's sitting there, I'm going to bend it and open it up. That's going to allow some of it to get down in there. bend it back and forth a few times. I'm going to take a clean Q-tip or a paper towel. The dust in the Q-tip kicks this off. You really don't need kicker, and I know Mark Morgan is going to be repairing some of his stuff. He took some of this CA home with him. Let me just bend this back. So I look forward to seeing if he's having any luck with this. And we're not looking for a cosmetic finish here. What I want is for that part to bond. Now CA, usually when it kicks off, the thin you usually don't need any kicker for. So what will happen is, and it's really, I give that 30 seconds or so just to kick off. I'll just take a little tiny piece of sandpaper, and what will happen is, all this will do is help it kick off. We're not trying to make it flat or cosmetically correct or anything at this point in time. But I thought this would be an interesting thing. We could kind of do this on a step-by-step basis, share the technology. For people that are interested, people that aren't, sometimes you just like to watch. I mean, I watch things on YouTube all the time that I'm not physically going to do. Now I'm going to give this a second shot. I'm just not being cheap with the glue. I want that glue to penetrate all the way in there. Okay, I can feel that it's getting, and remember, it's the dust in the Q-tips. It's actually the oil in your skin of your, if you do this without, and I would suggest not doing it without gloves, by the way, unless you like walking around with your fingers glued together. Now, just to be sure, this is a just to be sure thing. I'm going to put one, this is really an unnecessary step. It's only to speed this up so we don't sit here. Normally, I would just let this sit for a minute. Take another clean Q-tip. And once, it's amazing. You can see this once, you can go home and repair any fairing at all. I've never found a fairing you couldn't repair. This is about 10, 11 bucks, depending on if you have to pay shipping or whatever. The thick, same thing. Kicker, same thing. So you don't have a big investment in material to do this. Now I'm going to take a brand new edge of the sandpaper again. Not trying to make this flat with a sanding block. All I'm trying to do is make sure I have this, that the actual part of this is perfect. The actual part that we've repaired. Now see, even if I were to bend this now, that crack's never going to come back. When I say never, yeah, you could over tighten that bolt. And I would highly recommend, if anybody's doing this, to put little rubber washers. These things don't go anywhere. And if you Loctite the bolt and put a real tiny thin rubber washer on there, it's way better than a hard bolt. And I assume what happened here, somebody put a hard bolt in there. Now, we have the, as I do this, I always like to do the small pieces first. And I'm looking around, this one's fine, that one's fine. But even the ones that aren't cracked, I've already reinforced. Because I don't want them to crack in the future. When Vlad's riding a bike and we know he rides the bike. We see him every weekend. I see there's a little crack up here, which I'll address, but there's one big one. So I always save the big one for last. Now I've got to do exactly the same thing on this. Nothing changed. Little piece of sandpaper. This is just the first thing to see. I just want to see how bad this crack is, and it looks pretty. I've got it carbon fibered up about an inch past. I want to see if this is the kind of crack that you could be, if you didn't address it correctly, somewhere down the road. And I would guarantee these panels are not 10 bucks each on eBay. Whoever has these panels in perfect shape, you're going to pay through the nose. Yeah, that's putting it mildly. Anybody that has, any exotic bike, the more exotic the bike, get ready to pay. Anyway, but it's nice when we can salvage some of these parts, bring them back from wherever. Now, I wanted to show this first. Before I do anything, this is already carbon fibered. I want to bend these open and get that CA to sink in there before I do anything. This is the magic trick. This is the part of it that if you kind of skip over this, then there's a big price to be paid. And the big price is you somewhere down the road at who knows when or where, and you're riding with your best friends, and or you're wiping a bike off, and all of a sudden you're looking, uh-oh. It can be a disgusting feeling to see a crack in something that you've already fixed. Now I know I've got a good bond because as I'm squeezing this together, I see it's oozing out, which is always a good point. And even though this to me is it's a simple repair thing, it's from years of repairing airplanes that you learn these things. Because on an airplane, of course, it's got to be super light, it's got to be it's got to be perfect in every way to be real. A motorcycle does not really have to be that perfect. And a good way to look at it, they don't use BONDO on airplanes. There's no BONDO. So, okay, this is starting to get ready to kick off. What I'm going to do, again, just to speed the thing up, I really wouldn't have to do this normally. But again, I'm trying to do this in steps, so it kind of makes sense. This is step one. Get the carbon reinforcements in, get all of the cracks taken care of. Wow, that's perfect. Now, no matter what, we can block sand this flat and we can get all our preparation before we paint. This all has to be sanded down, of course, it's all got to look like that. But now this is going to be, this actually is step one, is we've got that repair done. The other one is done. And this is kind of, we'll be ready for the next step on this is going to be to address this area right here. And we'll do that on the next step of the video.